Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us back here at TrustBIX's channel. We have another exciting interview for you guys today. We're sitting here with Chief Industry Engagement Officer Deborah Wilson. We're going to dive into her background, how she got involved with the TrustBIX story. But first and foremost, Deborah, how are you doing today?
I am having a great day, Michael. I hope you are too.
I'm having a pretty wonderful day, and even more so now that I'm sitting here talking with you. So first and foremost, you're pretty deep in this industry. Tell me how you got started in it and what really attracted you to it.
I'll tell you what, Michael, I am a city girl. And if you'd ever told me that I was going to end up in the ranching / beef / agri-food technology industry when I studied business, I would not have believed you years ago. But you know, when you become a dashing ski instructor and you marry another dashing ski instructor and he then shocks your world and moves you home to the farm, you're in a whole new world. So the bottom line is I've been now in the ranching industry, the agriculture industry for 40 years. I have my husband and I, second marriage for both of us. We have a blended family. We raised 5 children on the ranch, did 4-H, did the whole ball game with them. And it's a wonderful place to raise a family. The lifestyle is awesome. And I have a great passion for the industry and for the environment and for how we care for our animals. So that extended into my children, their passion. Now I have 10 grandchildren, 6 of which are being raised on farms and ranches and also developing a passion for the industry. So that's my background. When my last one was in grade 12, I decided to go back into the workforce and not totally focus on our ranching business and the family. And I went into marketing and advertising in the agriculture industry. I spent about 18 years doing that. And one day I happened to get a phone call from Ted Power, who you have interviewed earlier. And he and I actually were teenagers together and grew up together. And he said, what do you know about traceability? What do you know about food? I know you're in the cattle industry, the beef industry. You know, you want to have lunch? So we had lunch together. And then he said, you need to meet my partner, Hubert Lau. And you've interviewed Hubert. And so it wasn't long and they offered me a position. And I came to work with BIX. And again, it's about my passion for the industry. And since that time, I've become heavily involved with the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, a third-party audited sustainable beef platform that TrustBIX has worked closely with. I've also become heavily involved with the National Index for Agri-Food Performance. That's a national movement with probably 80 members now. And it's all about how are we going to develop a set of indicators or an auditing process so that we can demonstrate to the rest of the world that Canada's agri-food production is sustainable. So for me, that's pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah. So that's interesting, your story from beginning to where you are now. You wouldn't have expected you would have wound up in this position when you had first gotten started, I'm sure. But you found a passion for it. It sounds like you converted your whole lifestyle. You're not a city girl at all anymore. Now you're getting your whole family into the ranching idea and being out there. So I guess from there, what are some of the like challenges you have to face in this industry that people might not be privy to?
Challenges. Of course, it's been a fairly male-dominated industry for the last 40 years, but I see a huge shift. I see women wading into the fray, which is pretty exciting for me. So all around diversity and inclusion, I see other ethnicities becoming involved in the industry. Again, a strong mix of women coming into the industry. And again, a huge willingness of producers to become involved in changing their practices. What would I have to do to be audited and be considered sustainable by a third-party audited program? Now, the interesting part of it is if you talk to the auditors, most of the producers that get audited right now are 95% of the way there. They only have to tweak a few things. It's mostly around record keeping. As far as being stewards of the land, which entails dealing with our carbon sequestration, greenhouse gas emissions. And I always joke around and say, well, the beef cattle have kind of been the whipping post for all of agriculture as far as the damage that we do to the environment. But the reality of it is, agriculture in Canada only impacts our GHG emissions and carbon about 9%. Actually, what you and I need to do, and every other person in Canada, we need to quit driving our vehicles.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
yeah.
we like to point the fingers at other groups as being the problem, but in reality, the farmers and the ranchers have done an amazing job of being stewards of our environment in Canada.
Yeah, it's definitely true that like almost all industries, it's modernized quite a bit, right? And as you said, there's almost been a cultural shift. Most people are almost there, right? They're trying to get there. The technologies came along to where it's a lot easier for them to be more sustainable now, true too. But I feel like a lot of the blame is based on how the old models used to be, similar to mining, for instance. People, when they think of mining, they think of the old Hollywood portrayal of it and so on. So they haven't quite caught up to how modernized things are now.
And if you think how exciting this is today, that the concept that we can track an animal from the time it's born until it hits the processing plant and turns into food for us, and it's harvested, it becomes the beef that we see, in our restaurants, in our grocery stores, and that we can actually track that. We have the technology. To me, that is phenomenal. So we're now closer to being transparent to our consumers, being able to track the carbon that's attached to those animals, being able to attach the GHGs to those animals, and therefore the food that we eat. And I say all the time, the biggest thing any consumer wants in Canada is when I put my plate in front of myself on the table, I want to feel good about what I eat. Yeah. And if I want to be able to do a little research on where this food came from, that ability is there, that transparency is there.
Yeah, that's good. We're talking to Ted, we had discussed like the fact that if there happens to be any sort of issues, how quickly they can be traced down and handled quickly as well because of the system versus in the past.
Well, I got to tell you, I am up to here in the beef industry. Mm-hmm. I can tell you, we have amazing Canadian Food Inspection Agency. They do a fantastic job on food safety. We've got the Canadian Livestock Traceability System, which is focused on disease and animal traceback if anything happens. Mm-hmm. You've got us, and we're following up and supporting the disease and traceback. But more than anything, we're wanting to give the consumers a window into what their food, what's been done with it. The biggest thing right now for people is, I don't want to feel guilty. Did that animal have a good life? We hear so much about factory farms, but these audits can actually go into how these animals were raised. And are there codes of practice? And as an industry, it doesn't matter whether it's the pork industry, the dairy industry, the beef industry, we all have codes of practice. And we're one of the most advanced countries in the world with those codes of practice.
Yeah. And, again, going back to the cultural side of things, people are caring more now too, and that they want these things, as you had said. Anytime something would slip out now due to the prevalence of social media that, hey, these people might not be doing this, consumers care, and you'll see marked drop-offs of sales of those items if they're not going up to snuff versus what people think things should be at this point.
And there's a new terminology out, Michael, I don't know if you're aware, but it's called greenwashing. Mm-hmm. So you can tell a great story if you go and you research a lot of the major companies. They're all putting out ESG reports. They're all putting out corporate social responsibility reports and statements. And You know what? They're just not talking about it anymore. They want to be able to measure. They want to give data. They want to understand that. So this is a huge part of the market for investments as well. Yeah. I want to invest in companies that have a strong ESG policy. I want to invest with companies that really do walk the talk about corporate social responsibility.
Agreed. As you said, transparency is key, and the technology now is getting to the point where things are pretty transparent. So, Deborah, let's pull it back to what your role at TrustBIX looks like. Can you demystify? So, as the Chief Industry Engagement Officer, what do you handle on the day to day? Like, walk people through a day of the things you handle.
So all of our communications basically runs through me. So I give the sign off on a lot of the communications. I work extensively on the website. And I get involved in a lot of industry initiatives like I was just mentioning to you before we started, the National Index for Agri-Food Performance. I mean, that's something that the industry has bid into. It started out of an event that Canada 2020 hosted. And then we went from there, and a small group of us started meeting and saying, what would it look like? How do we increase our exports to other countries, and especially the EU? How do we tell the story that the EU will feel good about importing our food products? As a country, we produce, we can eat about 60% of what we produce. Mm. So we got to sell 40% of it, and we got to be able to meet the demands of other societies and other countries. So I'm heavily involved in the National Index for Agri-Food Performance. TrustBIX has been a partner in it from day one. I'm a co-chair on the data committee. How do we handle the data to support what we do? I am on the National Council for the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. I'm on their Marketing Communications Committee. I'm on the Business Strategy Committee. And for me, it's all about transparency for the consumer. That's why I'm involved in these. How do we tell the story of what we've done with our food products? How do we track it? We have another initiative within our company. So we hear more and more about plant protein.
Yeah.
So now how do we take that traceability from animals, and how do we transfer it to poultry? How do we transfer it to grains or pulse crops? And pulse crops are the crops that create the plant proteins. And we're seeing more and more companies that are processing the pulse crops saying, we need to have some level of traceability. We need to know what you used on these crops. How were they fertilized? How were they sprayed? What was used on them? How did they transfer? So, I mean, even canola, which creates canola oil. How do we understand what's been done with it? Because it's all about when it lands on the consumer's plate. It's all about the stuff that we pick up off the shelf in our grocery store every day. How do we track all of that?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. And so I guess another question for you, and this is reaching a little bit. How do you feel like this industry is going to look in 5 years? As you said, you're seeing this happen with more and more things, not just the cattle industry. Do you imagine virtually everything related to agriculture and food will eventually be tracked this way? How do you see it playing out?
So how do I see this evolving? Growth, continuous growth. I've watched the Sustainable Beef Initiative, and it just continues to grow year over year. Are we blowing the doors off anything? I won't say we're blowing the doors off anything, but I am really excited about the producers that are stepping up and taking this on. One of my daughters, her family operation, they're certified sustainable. And that involves having a third party come onto your farm and go around with a report card and say, okay, what do you do here? What do you do here? And when this animal is this way, what do you do there? So it's very, very complete. It's not fluffy. And again, we really want to avoid this title of greenwashing.
Yeah. So it sounds like the industries came far from when you had first started, as you had said, but there's still a lot of room to go. There's still a lot of room for growth there. And it's interesting. So how do you feel about like the fact that like this is largely community driven now? Now, culturally, people are kind of embracing it versus before, say 20 years ago, if you were worried about stuff like this, people would be like, whatever, I just want my so on and so forth. But now people care. How does that feel?
I am so excited. You can't even believe it. I mean, things I say today, if I had said them in a room of producers 6 years ago, I would have been run out of town on a rail. And they all know I'm outspoken, and they all know but what's beautiful is they do know I'm passionate about food, I'm passionate about consumers, and I'm passionate about the industry and what we have to do to survive and continue to grow, and to grow our export markets. And all of this is so important to us as an industry. I mean, agriculture is I would venture, off the top of my head, I know in Alberta, it's the second largest industry. What it is in the, I still think if we look at the export markets that we fulfill as an agriculture industry, we're right up there in the exports nationally. And so I think it's key. Yeah. Am I excited? You have no idea how excited I am, because I see this as my children earning a living. I've got children living in the city. I've got children that are farming. I've got grandchildren that believe they're going to farm one day. In fact, my 8-year-old grandson told me one day, I really like this, your farm, Nana. I think it's a pretty nice farm. And I think when you and Papa die, I'll buy this farm. So, I mean, when you're 8 and you already see your clear path that I'm going to grow food, I'm going to raise cattle. I think that's amazing that they have a direction and they're wanting to feed the world.
Agreed,
or feed Canadians at that young an age, and understand that that's what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, it is one of the key things. Apart, we all need people who grow cattle, who take care of virtually everything food wise. That's one of the most interesting things. Is there's anytime you're eating something, it was a labor of love that someone took care of, right? So it was something that other people were involved in, for sure. So
it is. You think about the dairy industry. It's a 24-hour-a-day job, 7 days a week. The people that dedicate themselves to that, amazing.
Agreed. Well, Deborah, I think you did a pretty good job of, like I had said, demystifying what it is that you do. But of course, if anyone has any questions about it, don't be afraid to reach out. We'll happily dive into it further. But Deborah, thank you for joining. Do you have any closing words for people before we go?
No, I really enjoyed talking to you, Michael. It's so exciting for me to be able to convey what we do at TrustBIX, what we support, and where we're headed in the future. I mean, it is exciting for me.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you for joining, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll have more content for you soon. But for now, Deborah, have a wonderful day.